it certainly comes to light that maybe he's not the man that West Ham fans want. When you hear chants at the end of the game last night, he's getting sacked in the morning from the very fans that travelled last night to Leicester to watch West Ham play. Lopetegui says, no, I'm all right, and I'll carry on.
The only worry that I have is to recover tomorrow the players, to look forward the next challenge and to prepare the next matches in the best way and to be able to win the next matches. This is the only worry that I have. I feel that we are trying to do our way, to improve a lot of things, to change many things. In the meantime, we did well, we did not well. I think that we have to find this consistency. Okay, this team, the last part of the last season, they won only 4 matches in the second part of the season, and in this start we won the same number. The only thing that I am worried is to work tomorrow to stand up the players and to be ready for the next challenge.
And the next challenge is Monday. Against Wolves, and that's live on talkSPORT.
I'll be there.
Already, you there, Dan? The message is coming in 81089. There is one, no name in it. Jimmy's got to go now. He's lost the team. He's lost us, the fans. Chance of you getting sacked in the morning last night by the very fans who went to support the team. He's got to be sacked now. Get Graham Potter in. Simon, whether they do that or not is another matter. It's my understanding this morning that there will be a board meeting in the next 72 hours. Whatever is decided will be a joint board decision. But at the moment, there is no real way of telling how it's going to go. Although if it was to tip one way, it would maybe be in the direction that it's time up for Lopetegui. Have they got a decision to make, the board, at this stage?
Well, only they know, because ultimately you've got two versions. You've got the version that you see every single day behind the scenes that's building towards something, and you can see green shoots and you think you've got something to hold on to. And you've got the version that you see on Saturday afternoon or on a Tuesday night where they're not performing very well. If you know more than just the performance and you believe that the processes are going to come through and fruition is going to come, then you stay with it. If you don't know more, like we were discussing yesterday with the tuna Ilakali at Hull, you listen to the fans. Before I was a football club owner, I was a football fan. After I'm a football club owner, I'm a football fan. I would never stand in a football stadium saying you're getting sacked in the morning. So I can't relate to that mindset because I don't think it's particularly constructive. I'm not a huge fan of Lopetegui's, and I'm certainly not a huge fan of David Sullivan's. So with those two things in mind, it gives me a level of ambivalence. I look at the performance yesterday and say, whilst I think the structure of the team doesn't look right, with due respect to the game, if you closed your eyes, or you wouldn't be able to see it, would you? But if you ultimately looked at it without any investment, you would struggle to work out how West Ham contrived to lose that game 3-1. They dominated large proportions of the game. They had 31 shots on goal, 10 shots on target, and they turned an opportunity into snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. So Leicester were the fortunate ones to get the benefit of that opportunity. Now, I don't know after 13 games whether Sullivan and his cronies have never done this before. They like to stick with what they've got. They don't like to pay out compensation, and who does, for managers that are ultimately being made unemployed because of their failings. They took him for a reason. They must know what that reason was, and they must be able to measure the reasons why they took him against what's currently happening, against what they think could happen if they stay with him. And if there's a complete departure, if the guy sold him a pup, if he told them what he was going to do and how he was going to do it, and these were the things he expected to happen, and of course we expect better performances and higher up the table and more attacking vim. If all of that was a pup that he sold them, then they've got very clear measurables. If there are caveats, and there'll be no caveats in the fans of West Ham fans that travelled away to an away game and saw their team get beaten by what they consider to be a lesser than, which is Leicester City. They're a lesser than team that have only just come back up from the Championship, that are expected to be beaten by the teams like West Ham. So only when you're abreast of that sort of knowledge can you then sit there and say with any certainty why you'd fire somebody.
He's I mean, from a West Ham footballing perspective, they'll stay up. They're not going to get relegated.
But do you see any grounds for optimism holding on to
No,
Lopetegui?
not really. Whether he stays or goes, that won't be a problem. But the big problem he's got now is the fans have already turned. And that's not because of last night. Simon's right. In isolation, that game was a pretty decent performance. They made some silly errors defensively. They were a bit open at times. You know, Vardy in behind early on, classic mistake. Full-backs high and too wide too early too often. But I think now the fans have turned. The only way you climb that mountain is by having a really good run. Yeah. And they don't look like they're in a position where they're going to have a really good run of wins because I don't see a real pattern. Now, when you let a manager go like Moyes, who's quite pragmatic, very good defensively and plays a certain way, you'd think they'd have been looking for the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, a Hertzler, Ange Postecoglou type who's going to play a bit more what the fans want.
Yeah.
And what you've done is you've brought in someone who's kind of at a bit of a halfway house, really. He's not overly pragmatic and he's not overly on the front foot. And they're getting caught in between. They've got no legs in the middle of the park. They've spent a lot of money on players, so the fans aren't seeing an improvement. And
90 million plus on defenders.
Well, I've seen them. I tell you why I worry for him. I've seen them. I saw the home game against Chelsea and Arsenal. It wasn't just the fact they got beat by better teams. It was how they got beat. I mean, disarray they were in. Tactically, physically, attitude, basics. I think the players look a bit confused by it all.
So you're telling us, Danny, this isn't going to work?
Well, it depends what work looked like. Well, you know, is West Ham's ambition wasn't to stay in the division at the beginning of the season, was it? They will stay in the division.
I mean, it'll take care of itself on next week. If they get beat by Wolves at home, then probably the trigger will get pulled then.
Does he get the opportunity to get to that Wolves match?
Two games ago.
If this board meeting's in the next 72 hours.
2 games ago. And I think you take Arsenal in isolation. They're arguably
the best team. Simon, I did the game. Honestly.
Were they that bad?
It wasn't.
Arsenal were good.
Arsenal are playing well.
Yeah.
But when you break the goals down, which is what I did, some of the basics that wasn't going on, I mean, and the shape, just all over the place. And looking at it going, well, even the most novice football man can see that.
Yeah.
There were 3 games that I've watched West Ham in with any great degree of attention to detail. It was Palace when I thought they played well. It was Ipswich when I thought they played well. And the Newcastle game recently. And those are the 3 games that I've actually paid attention to specifically with West Ham. The other games I haven't besides last night's game, so I bow to Danny's greater knowledge. But a week ago, we're looking at it going, West Ham turned a corner. They've beaten Newcastle. A relatively informed side.
Newcastle missed. West Ham, that was arguably one of the best performances. But Newcastle you
can make the same argument last night for West Ham missing a hatful of chances and Leicester coming away with a victory.
But I'm not saying that West Ham are in trouble. So it's about your expectation as a fan base and about where you want to be.
No, we're not saying
they're
in trouble. We're saying that the direction of travel for them isn't what the fans want.
So they will have some good, because they've got good players, Jim. They will have some good performances. They beat Man U at home. Granted, Man U was struggling when they went there, you know, and they've had a couple of decent wins.
But if they're not doing the basics, Danny, as you say, who's that down to?
Well, it's always down to the coach. It's always down to the coach. Well, you know, you see United win at home 4-0 against Everton. You've got people pressing and flying all over the pitch who weren't doing it 3 weeks ago.
But if they're not doing the basics and he's not telling them, then Lopetegui's inept,
he will be telling them, but the
players aren't listening.
Or it's not that you deliberately don't listen. Some players just don't get on board with certain philosophies, and certain partnerships don't work, and certain tactics don't work. It's not a disrespect thing. It's just some groups of players don't bond with a man or don't take on board the message as well as others.
I understand, Simon, there's a feeling at the top of the house that at this moment a change was needed. It appeared that a change was needed. So Lopetegui was a change. It appears the change hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Be interesting to know who chose him.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, if they manage by committee, then I suspect they do that. I mean, the old David Sullivan used to read the Rothman's Guide to Football to make his decisions. but in this instance, David Moyes and West Ham just sort of fell out of love in the end, didn't they? There was no great big explosive reaction. It was simply they ran out of admiration for one another. Now, I'm not suggesting they need to look back at David Moyes and say, oh, you've got buyer's regret. They made a decision for the reasons that they made it. And David, in and of himself, I think, probably felt he's run his course at West Ham, probably getting fed up with being criticised. He also made his choices. He knew that the ownership and the fans specifically wanted a style of play, and he decided to play the way he wanted to play because that's what he believes in. So he knew the consequences of those decisions and the possession-based or the lack of possession-based game that he plays. So now they've gone into Lopetegui for whatever reasons they've gone there. If they've got it wrong, now whether they think Potter, I think Potter's a flake. Sorry, I know it's not a particularly positive thing to say, but I do. And so if they think that Potter is the answer, that would be an interesting outcome.
Who's a flake?
Graham Potter.
All right. Why?
I just do. I think his tenure.
What do you mean by flake? I'm not trying to be contentious, but I think
the manner in which he conducted himself at Chelsea was weak and lightweight, and turned it into, you know, he was psychologically under pressure and feeling, you know, the pressure of being, slightly intimidated by the circumstances and getting death threats because somebody told him to drop dead or something. And I thought to myself, that's not much of a leader.
Joe, I actually...
That's my...
I do remember that.
It's an individual takeaway, and it might be wrong,
but
that's
you know
my
what,
takeaway.
I actually think there's some validity in that. I think, yeah. I mean, it's a big job, West Ham. You've got to have some character and some backbone to go in there and be successful.
We're going to put it out there.
It might be fair.
Already the messages coming in thick and fast. West Ham fans, there's one. He cannot be a West Ham fan, this fella. No, he's not. David from Cardiff. West Ham fans are getting exactly what they deserve. They had a great manager in Moyes, who consistently delivered impressive league positions and a European trophy. And then they decided... he's not for them.
Do you know
this
what?
is a classic case of the grass is not always greener on the other side.
Well, it can be greener, but this is a great example of a bigger picture now in football, which is so many fans now wanting to see this entertaining, high-energy front foot football, more so than caring about winning. You don't want to lose every week, but fans want to be entertained. And that is spreading across the board. It's no good anymore to win 1-0 with 30% possession. Fans don't want to see it.
Right.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.